Hi everyone, this is Manny live from Samurai CPA, and today we're going to talk about the tax implications of having employees. This is a hot topic for small businesses who are often confused and overwhelmed by the complexity of the tax laws, and they want some clarity on, hey, what exactly do we have to pay? What's the amount? That is all stuff that I deal with, and today I'm here to give small businesses a primer so they can understand what goes into their payroll taxes. So let's break this down from a 10,000-foot level. There are a few moving parts so that we can all understand payroll tax appropriately. There's a federal piece, and there's also a state piece as well. So the three federal pieces are FICA. So this includes Social Security tax and Medicare tax. It's shared 50-50 with the employee and the employer if we deem the worker to be an employee. If they're deemed to be a contractor, then the entire responsibility of the tax falls on the contractor and the employer doesn't owe any taxes. This is a very tricky and heavily audited area, which I'll get into later, whether someone is an employee or a contractor. The second piece is the federal income tax, that is tax withheld directly from a employee's paycheck. Why do you have to withhold income from someone's paycheck? Well, you're not actually paying the tax, but you are holding that money to be remitted to the feds because according to the IRS, if I earn, let's say, $120,000 over 12 months, should I pay tax at the end of the year or should I pay tax throughout the year? You have to pay tax on income as you earn it. And the way that we do it is we withhold bi-weekly so that the tax is being remitted as the income's being earned. Otherwise, you're getting an interest-free loan, and the IRS doesn't like that. The Federal Unemployment Tax Act is the third piece. It's 6% on the first $7,000 of wages, but there are credits that allow you to offset that. This is where talking to a CPA about your exact situation makes sense. State liabilities. Now, this is the tricky one because every single state has their own obligations, but typically there are two pieces. Just like for federal taxes, you have to withhold. So there's a withholding piece, and then there's also a unemployment tax piece as well. There are two accounts that you have to create with your State Department of Revenue, typically for remitting the tax withholdings, but this is all something a CPA can walk you through as a small business owner. Now, let's talk about worker classification. It's a key driver between how much tax you actually have to pay. All right, there's two kinds of workers out there, the W-2 employee and the 1099 contractor. It is in your favor as a small business owner for your workers to be classified as 1099, but the problem is if you misclassify people, there are pretty severe penalties for doing that. A W-2 employee, you withhold federal tax, state tax, and the employer's share of the FICA. You also have to have the employer pay their share of the FICA plus federal and state unemployment taxes. And reporting and benefits, a employee gets a form called a W-2 at the end of the year. This helps them report their taxes, and it's a very important piece of documentation you got to issue to your employees. The 1099 contractor format is very favorable to the employer. You don't withhold any taxes. The contractor withholds all their taxes. There's no self-employment tax for you, but all of it falls on your contractor. Reporting and benefits is done through a 1099 NEC. And you also don't owe contractors benefits or unemployment insurance because they're not an employee. Now, the IRS generally presumes a worker is an employee and has severe penalties for miscategorization. If you want to have a contractor, you probably should talk to the CPA to make sure you have all your documentation in order and that you have all the evidence to support that they are a contractor and not an employee. Now, how do we remit these taxes? Federal depositing and reporting, this is done through Forms 941, 940, and compliance timelines. We're not going to bore you with all the nuts and bolts of the forms. That's our job to deal with the CPAs. But you must deposit on a monthly or a semi-weekly schedule. The Form 941 is filed quarterly to report wages, tips, and federal income withheld from employees. And then a Form 940 is filed annually to go over your annual liabilities. Now, what about states? It's actually quite similar. You got a state unemployment tax that is something you got to deal with, and then you also have the state income tax withholding as well. Now, what happens if you have remote workers in multiple states? You now have multi-state complexity where you're dealing with different jurisdictions, and wherever they're doing the work, you create nexus, which means that you now trigger a taxable liability in that state. So I do not recommend doing multi-state payroll by yourself. You really got to talk to a professional for that. Some people do successfully handle simple payrolls by themselves. The second one, you have multi-state complexity, pump the brakes and talk to a professional. Now, what are the costs of non-compliance? Unregulated compliance shifts 100% of the liability onto you. So payroll tax compliance is interesting because a lot of times when companies are not compliant, it triggers fines at the corporate level and the entity is fined but not you. In this case, it's a little bit different. If you fail to remit withheld taxes, the IRS can actually say you're personally liable. And nearly 30% of small businesses face IRS interest and penalties from filing errors. Dodging payroll taxes is not something you want to do, but there are legal ways to lower your liability. And a good CPA worth his salt is always thinking about how to lower the bill at the end of the year. So, what are some compliant ways to lower your liability? First of all, S Corp structuring can be very favorable for small business owners earning substantial income. While there are costs to maintain the entity, a S Corp structure allows you to only pay self-employment tax on the part of your earnings that's deemed a W-2 salary. The rest are owner distributions. And this is where a CPA comes in handy as well because the IRS wants that salary to be deemed reasonable. There are penalties if it's not reasonable because you can't just make 3 mil a year as a business, work 40 hours a week and say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to pay myself $20,000 a year. The rest is a owner distribution." The IRS does not like that, and we're here to keep people out of trouble. You can also hire contractors internationally with a Form W-8 Ben. This is a form that certifies the contractor is overseas. They do their work overseas. They're actually a contractor, and you therefore don't owe any payroll tax on them. The third lever is strategic oversight with a dedicated CPA to ensure that you got your compliance in order and you're not getting hit with any penalties. This is a defensive strategy because, hey, fines, penalties, interest adds up, and our job is to make sure you don't get any. Now, how do you implement a comprehensive payroll compliance program? Partnering with a licensed accountant reduces compliance risk, ensures accurate classification, and optimizes tax structures legally. We have taken intense coursework in one of the hardest exams in the country just about accounting, taxation, and getting it all right. This is our lifeblood, this is our specialty, and we also offer audit protection as well. In case of an audit, you can go through us. We're authorized to represent you so you can focus on running your business versus getting on phone calls with nasty people from the IRS. We make sure that your compliance is up to date because we make sure every worker is classified properly. If they're not, we'll help you get to compliance. We're not rats. We have no obligation to rat people out if they're not compliant. We'll get them up to compliance and there will be no problem next year. Strategic scaling, well, you let me put it this way. Every single hour you spend in payroll is an hour you're spending not delivering work, selling, or scaling your business. You can reclaim time when you work with a CPA. So if you're a small business owner, you want to pick my brain about payroll tax compliance, you want someone to run your payroll, or you need someone to review how things are currently set up, give us a call or text us at 980-507-4174 or shoot us an email at manny@samuraicpa.com. I really look forward to hearing from all of you. And as a Samurai CPA, my job and my duty is to serve with precision, honor, and respect. I'm Manny Lai, signing off.